Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren in the Books. And today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of March. And I read 15 books. That many. 15. Which is very good because I was a bit disappointed about reading last month. And I said to myself, I'm going to read a book every other day in March. And it's the 30th of March, not even the last day of March. I'm filming this on the 30th. And I've read 15 books. Well done me. So I'll start with two books that I actually finished in February after I've gone on about how wonderful I was. The two books that I finished in February were... So these don't even count in my reading wrap-ups. These have been added. So really, 17 in this pile. Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. Absolutely love this. I gave it 5 stars again. I really love to reread this every so often. I'm listening to the audiobook of The Subtle Knife at the moment and it is amazing. It's done like a radio play almost. So someone's narrating and then the speech is done by different actors and it's just brilliant. But the first one's also very good and I gave that 5 stars. And then The Trap by Melanie Raab, which I gave 1 star, I think. I really didn't like this at all. We read it for my online book club. I thought it was going to be really gripping and twisty-turny and it was just a bit blur and a bit sort of obvious from the off really and just full of a sort of daft twists and turns and wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. So those are 2 books I finished in February. Anyway, forget about those. Let's get on with the books that I've read in March. So the first book that I finished in March is a book that I started in the month of January, and that is Stories from the Kitchen, which is an Everyman's Pocket Classics of all different short stories about food and eating and dining and just things that I love. Simon from Savage Reads, Nia Babe, he got me this, and I've been sort of perusing it since January. I started it when I was staying up there with him, and every so often I'd have a bath and read a nice short story about food, and I really enjoyed some of these. They've got lots of authors that you would definitely recommend. Charles Dickens, have you heard of that guy? One I particularly enjoyed was Nora Ephron story, which was called Potatoes and Love, and that is from the book Heartburn, which I actually really want to read. And another one I enjoyed as well was the guy who wrote, what is his name? The guy that wrote My Family and Other Animals. What is his name? Come on, guys. I can't think of his... Oh, Gerald Durrell. And in here, there is a story about when Gerald goes to get an owl from a neighbour's house and he ends up having a meal there. And like, it was just nature and food and just enjoyment. If you're into food, these are beautiful gifts. I've also got the Christmas one. Mercedes got me the Christmas stories for Christmas. No, for my birthday. And these are just lovely gifts and I think they're going to look beautiful all lined up next to each other. So very lovely and enjoyable. I think I gave that 3 stars. Then the next one I read, I always forget how heavy these are, was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the illustrated edition. I like to reread Harry Potter, the whole series, every year, and I didn't actually finish it last year. And here is a weird thing. I think I got to book 5 last year, and that's really blocking off my hearing from there. And I got to book 5 last year, and I always feel like I have to start again in January, and I hadn't read anything, so I read this. I read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I'm actually on the Chamber of Secrets illustrated edition too. These are beautiful. Like, I've done a whole review about this the first time I read it, but every time I open it, it opens to one of my favourite pages, which is Diagon Alley, just done so beautifully. Jim Kay is just... He's just imagined it wonderfully, and I really love it. And I also like that they're different colours underneath. This one's red, and the Chamber of Secrets is orange. So very enjoyable. Obviously, I love Harry Potter so much. The next book, oh, Minnie sat down there, all beautiful. The next book that I finished was an audiobook of Girls Will Be Girls by Emma O'Toole. This has sort of been flying around BookTube for a while, but it seemed to have had a bit of a resurgence. And I listened to the audiobook of this and adored it. The introduction is read by Emma O'Toole, and then the rest of the book is read by another girl, Olivia Cafferty, I want to say. I might be wrong. Doesn't say on there. And she does an amazing job, so she is also Irish, it's just nice to hear it in an Irish voice. This, for me, I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it, and I'm going to be buying myself a hard copy of it. Hard copy. So I can read it. I've been really sort of getting into things to do with gender and identity and things like that this year. I mentioned in my screen time video with David, that I will link down below, how I've been watching Secret Life of 4-year-olds, which has been doing a lot of work with gender and kids growing up and what they think of each other. And this was just... perfect. It had, and I've heard a lot of people say this, it had the ideas that I almost had sort of like floating dreamily around my head, it brought them all together and structured them for me in a way where I was like, this is what I've been thinking. It gave me so much to think about. I really would urge everybody to read it, man, woman, anybody, and I loved it. It's just amazing. Like, it just really pulled together ideas, and also she's come from a place where she's sort of, so Emma herself was saying that she would, when she worked in a bar, when she was a teenager, she would sit on a sort of bar stool and say, I don't know why girls should have the same rights as men. I wouldn't want the same rights as men. And then sort of went on a journey of her own to realise that she was talking crap, basically. But I really, really loved it, and I will listen to it again, and I will read it again. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. Best non-fiction I've read this year. Best non-fiction, I feel like saying best non-fiction I've ever read. I really, really feel strongly about it. The next book that I read was... This was also a 5-star book. I've read so many 5-star books in the month of March. A lot of them are rereads, but enjoyable nevertheless. This was a 5-star read. This was Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. This is the new Picador 20th anniversary edition. It's got an introduction by Caitlin Moran, and I love the introduction. It starts with, one of the loveliest things about being a human is that every 5 years or so, you get to reread Bridget Jones's Diary. And that perfectly encapsulates everything, that it is a real treat to reread Bridget Jones's Diary. And I just laid in the bath and just read this introduction, and I was like, this is such a treat to be in the bath rereading Bridget Jones's Diary, that I find hilarious, relatable, topical. I can't believe it was written 20 years ago. It feels like it was written yesterday. So it's about Bridget Jones. I'm sure you've all heard of it. And there's a film that I also very much enjoy, who's a woman in her 30s, sort of just plodding through life in a job in publishing, wanting to get a boyfriend. She's got a mad mother, a lovely father. Her friends are an eclectic mix of people, and it's just wonderful, and it's such a treat to read. And I will reread this again and again and again because I love it, and I really enjoyed it. We read it for book club at work, and I was just so fizzing with happiness over it. Nobody loved it quite as much as I did, but I don't know. And another thing Caitlin Moran says in the introduction is that depending on what time you are in your life, you can read it and get a different message from it. So I am, like, in my 30s now. I'm 30. That counts as in my 30s. And now I'm reading it at a similar age to Bridget, whereas I read it when I was 16, and I was just like, oh, this is really funny, and then I read it in my 20s a few times and things like that. And yeah, it's just wonderful. I really love it. I really, really love it. One of my favourite books ever, actually, I think. One of my favourite books ever. The next book I read was on International Women's Day, and that was We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is her TED Talk published into a little chapbook, which is absolutely lovely. There she is on the back. She's my babe. I just love her. And this is just about feminism and why everyone should be a feminist. And I read somewhere that I think it's in Sweden that this is a textbook for all the girls, maybe everyone, is given a copy of this book. And I do feel like that is a very, very sensible thing to do, and I like to force this on people. David, I think you should read this. He's nodding. He's nodding consent. And yeah, I just read that on International Women's Day, and girl power always. 5 stars, obviously. Anything Bridget Jones does. Bridget Jones did not write that. The next book I read was Food Anatomy by Julia Rothman, The Curious Parts and Pieces of Our Edible World. This was a book that I bought for David for Christmas, and you read it. It was the first book you read this year, wasn't it? So yes. David's deep in a game of carrot fantasy over there. He couldn't give a shit what's going on over here. And as he was reading, I found myself sort of like looking over his shoulder thinking, I really want to read that. I really want to get into that. It is a graphic novel about all the different foods throughout the world and different facts and it. So it's set into different chapters. So we've got vegetables. How rude, someone's ringing me. Meat section, vegetables, like one of my favourite sections was how dinner tables are laid out. It's right at the beginning, how dinner tables, place settings are laid out in different parts of the world. And this is just a really enjoyable, but there we go, different stoves, and facts about fruit and veg and things. And I love food. I love cooking food. I love eating food. I love talking about food. And this was a real treat for me to sort of learn a few like facts and things in a really fun way. It reminded me of like books that I used to love when I was younger. I used to love like fact books, and I remember I had like the bumper book of facts or something, and as I was reading it I was getting the same sort of feelings like, that's interesting, that's interesting. Even things like how to fillet a fish and different knives that they use in seafood, short order egg lingo. She's done a whole range of these, farm anatomy and nature anatomy, which I do feel like maybe, I don't know how interested I'd be in farm anatomy, but nature anatomy I feel like I would be interested in. And I think I'm probably going to get hold of those because I really, really love this, and I think I gave it 4 stars, but I've just had to cancel that. I did give it 4 stars, yeah, so 4 stars. The next book was yet another 5-star rating. And also, I don't want you to watch this thinking I'm giving like all the books 5 stars. I'm normally very, very stingy with my 5 stars. I don't often, I often go months without giving out a 5-star book. It just so happened that there was lots of 5-star books. Obviously, a lot of rereads. They won't count as my best books of 2017 because I don't count rereads in that. Anyway, stop sitting there with your things back like you're on the bloody beach and get on with it. The next book I read, which I was probably not including like the rereads, this was my favourite book of the month. This is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. This has, oh god, it's just such a beautiful thing. Look, like everything about it. Without, I could show you this and not even tell you what it's about, and like I feel like everyone would want it. It's just gorgeous. Anyway, this is set in London and Essex in 1893. It follows a character, Cora Seaborn, whose husband has just died, and she goes to Essex in search of this mythical Essex Serpent. She is a scientist, and she's always been very interested in nature. She brings her son with her, and while she's in Essex, she befriends a vicar, although I don't know if he's a vicar or if he is a vicar, sorry, I was thinking there's other names for these people. He's a vicar, his name is William Ransom, and she befriends him, and they have a really interesting relationship because she's very scientific about things and he is very spiritual and religious about things. There's all this talk about, is the Essex Serpent real, or is it something else that's going on? It follows her friend who is a surgeon, a storyline from him. I just loved all the characters in here and was just so interested by it. It was just beautiful. The prologue, which is set on New Year's Eve, before I'd even got into meeting any of the actual characters, was just amazing. Like, I'll read you the first like 3 lines and you'll be bang up for it. A young man walks down by the banks of the Blackwater under the full cold moon. He's been drinking the old year down into the dregs until his eyes grew sore and his stomach turned, and he was tired of the bright lights and bustle. I'll just go down into the water, he said, and kiss the nearest cheek. I'll be back before the chimes. Now he looks east to the turning tide, out to the estuary, slow and dark, and the white gulls gleaming on the waves. You got a bonus extra line there because it was the first paragraph. Oh, when I read that, I read it aloud to David and I was like, my God, this is going to be amazing. And just holding this and talking about it makes me want to read it again. There's lots of letters in there, so I really like sort of mixed... I wouldn't... Mixed media makes it sound very modern, but like the fact that it's broke up by letters and you learn so much from these letters between Cora and Will, and Cora and Luke, the doctor, and yeah, it's just perfection. It's absolute perfection. It's been nominated for the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction this year. It got, I think I may have mentioned, Waterstone's Book of the Year. I can't rave on about this enough. I absolutely adored it, and I will be reading it again. I always have a rule where I can't reread books in the same year, but maybe there's so many books to read. I want to reread that again. The next book that I read, I haven't got because I've lent it to my friend. I read the graphic novel Ethel and Ernest by Raymond Briggs. This was a reread again. I reread it. So many rereads. I reread it for book club and my online book club. A lot of people on online book club had never read a graphic novel before. And we're making a real effort on my Facebook book club to read genres that we don't always read, and I thought this would be a really good one, and it's probably my favourite graphic novel ever. It tells the story of a couple, Ethel and Ernest, who meet in the 1920s, get married, they live through the war, and it follows their entire lives up until the 1970s when they sadly but inevitably die. It's a real good reflection on like social things that are going on in Britain. The artwork in the book, I wish I had it here because I could show you. The artwork in the book reflects beautifully the coziness of the story, and you become quite attached to the characters in there. You're in their lives and you're seeing them have a child and get electricity for the first time and get a phone and get a TV. I feel like I'm just saying all things to do with technology, but you really feel you're with them. And being an English gal myself, I didn't do history to a higher level. I stopped studying history when I was at school when I was about 14, I think. So some of these things were familiar with me, like the things that happened, obviously the war. And yeah, I just found it really interesting and enjoyable and cosy. You loved it as well, didn't you?
I did like it, yeah.
And we both were in tears when we finished it. Or you said, what did you have? Wet eyes.
Wet eyes, yeah.
You weren't crying, it was just wet eyes.
Mm.
Yeah, I had a bit of a moment then, just looking out the window thinking about it. But yeah, it's really, really lovely. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. The next book I listened to was an audiobook. Again, I've done 2 audiobooks this month. That's very impressive. And it was Born a Crime. I've got to see the full title, excuse me. Born a Crime, Stories from an African Childhood by Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah is a South African comedian. I understand he's quite a lot more famous in America than he is in the UK. He's been on a few like panel shows and things, and this is an audiobook about his life. He is a mixed race guy. His mother was black and his father was white. He didn't really know his father very much growing up. His mother wanted to have a child and found somebody to have a child with, and it just so happened he was white. At the time that Trevor's growing up, there's a lot of racial tension in South Africa where he lives, and he really brings it to you in a way that's very accessible, and it really stays with you. And I would listen to it on the way home from work and still be thinking about it the next morning when I woke up, and I really feel like it's very important. It's very well written as well for someone who's there's funny bits in there, but there's also like horrible, hard to listen to bits, and he just did a very, very good job. Very much found it interesting. God, can you put that on the front of the audiobook? And yeah, also the fact that it was narrated by the author is something that I love. I constantly refer to that, and I love that he would do like his mother's voice, and I just thought that was a really nice personal touch that he would do this impression of his mum, like when he was saying things that his mother had said to him. He would do his mother's voice and things like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I think I gave it 4 stars. I believe I did give it 4 stars. The next book I read was the Handsworth Times by Sharon Duggal. My God, maybe I should have split this into 2. No, we'll power through. This was one of the books that I got from Mothbox, which is a book subscription service run by Mercedes from Messie's Book Communities. I will link her channel and the website down below, where you get a box with 2 independently published books. Blue Moose was a publisher I'd never heard of, and since then I've actually been onto their website. Oh, I almost dropped it. And bought 2 more books from Blue Moose because I enjoyed this so much. This is set in 1980s in Handsworth, which is in Birmingham, and it's told about the Agarwal family, who are an Indian family who are living in Thatcher's Britain at a time where there's not much work for people. Mukesh Agarwal, Mr. Agarwal, he loses his job very early on, and there's also something horrific that happens to the family that they have to deal with. This is a really good story about family dynamics, and they've got all their children are so different, but you get to know them all really well, and I just really, really enjoyed this. And I love books set in the 80s anyway, and like this is by no means like a happy book, or like it's not full of like cheer and things like that, but it's very nostalgic to me, and I love the bits about food. Indian food is some of my favourite food, and they had some really like in-depth descriptions about meals they were eating and things like that. Even when they had no money, they would find money from somewhere to have these amazing foods. And yeah, it was just really enjoyable, and I really loved all the characters. And thank you to Mercedes for sending me, because of Blue Moose, I've really enjoyed this, and they were doing a 2 for £10 offer on their website, which if they're still doing, I will link that down below, because I've got a couple of books. I need to haul them first though, so I can't show you now. Next book I read, God, I keep getting text messages, I'm so next book I read, snapped them out. Oh no, the next book I read was Human Acts by Han Kang. I've been meaning to read this for a long time, since I read The Vegetarian last year. This was a very unusual book for me. I knew I'd watched people's reviews and knew what it was about, but it still sort of come as unusual to me, and also it was very, and I don't want to use the word gory, because that sort of like makes it sound like cinematic, and it's not. These are like real, this is real shit that happened, but really quite, yeah, gory is the only word I can think of. There's lots of like blood and guts and gore in it. Yeah. It's told from about South Korea, a place called Gwangju, in the 1980s, and there is a student uprising, and this is a book told in the aftermath of the student uprising from 7 different points of view. It's told, so like literally instantly after the thing, there's told from the boy, and then he's looking for a friend that has died in the uprising. Then the next chapter is told from the perspective of the friend that's died, and for instance, there's quite a lot of like trigger warnings for this book, and death is one of them. It really made me think about death quite a lot. And the boy is in this pile of bodies, and he's saying that his his naked tummy is touching somebody else's, and he's waiting to, and should his spirit go? And yeah, it was tough going. It was tough going to read, and there's also told from the perspective of someone who's been tortured, and that was really tough going to read. There's a lot of tough bits in this, but I think it's really important and something I would never have come into contact with had I not read this book. And I just think Han Kang writes wonderfully, and it's hard to get into words what I think about something that's so tough to read, but still very engrossing. So it's hard to say like what you feel like about a book when you can't say like, oh, I really enjoyed it, because there is not things in here to enjoy, but I was really compelled to read it, and I think I gave it 3 stars, maybe 3 stars. The next book I read was Very Good Lives by J.K. Rowling. So after I read We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I was like, oh, I loved reading that talk from a feminist woman, and I knew I also had this, which I bought last year. This is an illustrated edition of J.K. Rowling's speech when she delivered at Harvard University, and she chose to speak about benefits of failure and the importance of imagination. And it's just really nicely, I mean, I laid in the bath, talking about the bath a lot, aren't I? I laid in the bath and read this, and it's just a really nicely illustrated speech, and yeah, I just think she's wonderful. And I cried at the end of it. Been doing a lot of that, haven't I? Oh my god, we watched Pete's Dragon, and I cried a lot during that, didn't we?
You did.
Well, did you cry, or was it just me?
I had to call you a wambulance, didn't I?
Call you a wambulance. The next book I read was Trio by Sue G. This, as I was saying earlier, this is from Mothbox, which is what the other book, the Handsworth Times, was also from. This is published by Salt, a publisher that I had not read anything by before. This is really interesting. I would never ever have come across this or even been sort of interested in reading it had I read the back and thought, oh yeah, that sort of sounds for me. Unless I'd have... David, stop biting your nails.
Only bit it once.
I had to tell him off, didn't I?
Only once.
Don't tell him! Stop it! This tells the story of a teacher in it's set in the 1930s. What's this big lamp? Oh, it's you get a free bookmark with it as well. His wife dies. He's a young chap, and his wife dies young, and he comes into contact. One of his friends is in a trio of musicians with 2 ladies, which he falls in love with one of them, and it's just him dealing with his feelings when he's still so in love with his wife who's died, and trying to come to terms with the fact that she died so young, and falling for this new person, as well as it being a really musical, lyrical book. I have not a musical bone in my body, but I really enjoyed the bits about the music and the reactions people were having listening to these beautiful pieces that they were playing. And I thought, like, reflected in like the musicality of it, it just flowed really nicely. Like, I love. Look at that. What a knobhead. Someone on a motorbike. You might not have even heard that. You might have just thought I was just saying what a knobhead. It flowed really beautifully in like the way that someone who knew about music would write a bit. But there's something in the middle I turned the page over of this bit because, and I'm not a romance reader, and I would almost be put off of a book would I know that it's a romance novel. But there's a bit here where when they sort of kiss for the first time and sort of like truly realise their feelings for each other, that I just found so romantic and beautiful. I went back and read it about 4 times because I just loved it. So he goes to her house and she's playing the piano, and he's talking to her through the window, and there's a bit here, so let's go. She laughed and nodded, but Stephen knew it must be so. If the dog were anywhere about, he'd have come racing out from the footfall, and he ducked down a little bit, climbed through the window. It felt like the freest and most spontaneous thing he'd done in years. Hello, hello. They stood before one another as they'd done in the firelit hall, and still, for a moment, there was a shyness between them. Then he stepped forward and held out his arms, and she came into them swift and sure. He held her close, he stroked her head, and she leaned on his shoulder. There was so much for height, and it felt as if they had all the time in the world, that for as long as they wanted, there was no need for anything more than this, just holding each other at last. And I just feel like it had just been such a long time coming, and he'd had such a hard time coming to terms with his feelings for this person, that it really touched me. And yeah, I thought this was really beautiful and enjoyable, and I gave it 3 stars. So well done. Another success from Mercedes. That book pile is getting pretty tall. The next book I listened to, the 3rd audiobook of the month. I've been playing through the audiobooks. Is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. I finished this yesterday, and this is also a book that is nominated for the Bailey's Women Prize for Fiction. I think this book, I'm certain the Essex Serpent, I hope, and I think they probably will, the Essex Serpent and Stay With Me will be shortlisted. And I'm really, really pleased I listened to the audiobook, and I'm also pleased I persevered with it. What are you laughing at?
Your serpent, it will be.
I'm serpent, it will be. Well done. Look at you, just sat there. He's not even doing anything, he's just sat watching me like a telly.
Looking at Minnie.
Oh, he's looking at Minnie. Minnie's down there. This is a story set in Nigeria, told about a character. David's walking. A woman who is married to a chap called Akin, and they're trying for children, and she hasn't been able to have children. And I went to this not knowing anything, and I feel like I'm giving away spoilers by telling people about the storyline, because I didn't know anything about it when I started listening to it. And they've been trying for a baby for a long time, and she's got a sort of mental condition where she believes that she is pregnant, even to the point where she puts on weight and sort of like she goes to hospitals and has scans, and they tell her that she hasn't got a baby in there, and she's like, oh, he's a junior doctor, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and goes to another hospital, and then is told there and said, oh, I can't believe all these people saying I haven't got a baby, I can't wait for my baby to get here. And she has this mental condition where she isn't able to have a baby, and then she does eventually fall pregnant, and then unfortunately her child dies, and it just goes through her and Akin's life. She is a very independent woman, and I really liked her as a character. She's got her own business, she's a hairdresser, she is not afraid to stand up for herself. She started off not as a weak character, but I was a bit like, oh, come on, you can do it. But she's a really strong woman, and I really, really enjoyed this very, very much. I'm so glad I listened to the audiobook. When I was first listening to the audiobook, I was saying to Mercedes and Simon, oh, I'm worried because they're Nigerian names and I'm not familiar with them, and I feel like I'm good, and there's quite a lot of names in there, and I feel like without seeing them I'm not going to become familiar to them. Well, listening to the audiobook was just amazing, because first of all, she was saying the names correctly, as I would be unable to do, and she was also doing all these like dialects and voices. There was singing in there, there was such, like, as I mentioned earlier, a child dies in it. There was such raw emotion when she was in doing the voice of the mother who was in mourning for her child. It was a really amazing experience, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that's another one I'm gonna re-listen to it. Another one I'm gonna re-listen to. So well done, Audible, for that. The last book that I've read this month was Swallowing Mercury by Violetta Gregg, which is a story about it's a novel about Viola and her life. It's told into like very short chapters, almost short stories. They're very like, nothing really sort of like gets carried over to the next story. You don't end and think, oh, that's that, and then brings over. I didn't know how I feel about this. I feel like I had very, very high hopes, and I went to it thinking it would be wonderful, and I didn't love it. I gave it 2 stars, so it was okay, and it really was okay, but I'm not familiar with Polish history, and there was a lot in here that I didn't know about, and yeah, it was just fine. Like, which is a bit of a bum note to end the month on, having been loads and loads of 5-star books and loads of new reads and new publishers and all that excitement, and then to sort of end on that was all right. But yeah, it was fine, and I gave it 2 stars. So those are the books. Goodness me, that's high. Those are the books that I read in the month of March. Very pleased with myself. I'm really pleased with myself. Well done, me. I hope you all had a lovely reading month. What did you guys get up to reading? Have you read any of these books before? Let me carry them over here. Oh, God, here we go. Oh, no! Have you read any of these guys before? If so, what did you think of them? And I would love to hear your thoughts. And I will see you all again for another BookTube video soon. Goodbye!